This is Group K's History 317L presentation over resource distribution from the 1930s to the 1960s. We chose nuclear power as our resource.
Produced energy was first developed in the early 1940s during the period of the Second World War. Otto and the German chemist Enrico Fermi, an Italian physicist, were the first pioneers and discoverers of nuclear-produced energy through fission. The initial focus of nuclear energy was to produce weapons for warfare by splitting atoms of particular isotope. In 1950, saw attention turned to the peaceful purpose of nuclear fission for power generation. Commercial nuclear power plants started operation in the 1950s. The first nuclear power plant designed to provide energy to a community was established in Obinets, Russia in 1954. In the United States, the first reactor to produce electricity was constructed and located in Arco, Idaho. Today, nuclear plants produce over 12% of the world's electricity without CO2 emissions.
The main concern of storage is a waste byproduct. When the U.S. first began storing nuclear waste, there was limited knowledge about what to do. Originally at sites such as Hanford, they poured out the waste into trenches or buried it into wooden crates. This was not environmentally safe. Another problem is the ethics of storing the spent fuel on Indian reservations. While they are being paid, large portions are under the poverty line and provided with few alternatives. There are no deep geological storage sites. The reason is a mixture of public not wanting it near them, referred to as the not in my backyard effect, and legislative barriers. There are also certain geological concerns. The U.S. also does not have any reprocessing plants to reuse the uranium. Currently, the waste is put into steel casks and put into spent fuel pools of water and closely monitored.
Distribution of nuclear energy throughout the country grew exponentially, starting at approximately 10 million kilowatt-hours of energy distributed in 1957 and growing to just under 4 billion kilowatt-hours within 10 years. The recent distribution of nuclear energy has leveled out to approximately 800 billion kilowatt-hours since 2005. Nuclear power accounted for 1% of all energy in the U.S. in 1957, but now accounts for approximately 20% of all energy distributed in the country. There are a limited number of companies with government permission to operate the 104 currently open nuclear power plants after a number of closures in Tennessee and in the Northeast.
From the 1930s to 1960s, we saw technical deficiencies in nuclear power plants due to the poor management of the source by companies and their contractors. In the United States, we saw a false sense of security, and Congress insisted that 4 reactor projects had to be closely inspected. Companies were understaffed, and we saw that regulations were not entirely strict on the matter, and eventually they had to prove management competence. Today, nuclear power management regulations have become stricter to protect the people and the environment. An integrated management system was created to ensure safety, health, environmental security, quality, and economic elements. A management database has also been created to track and account for source and special nuclear material to ensure it's not stolen or given to unauthorized users.
From its start, nuclear energy was widely supported by Americans. During this time, America was one of the top nuclear consumption countries. The rise of the new industry promised safe, environmentally clean, and economical production of energy, but because of its potential use as a weapon, a treaty was created in order for countries to focus on energy practices and not weaponization. Following the accident at the 3 Mile Island nuclear power plant, people began to realize how dangerous nuclear power can be. In response, activists such as mothers and environmental groups led demonstrations against nuclear energy. From the 1970s to the early 2000s, nuclear energy has been stagnated and has remained roughly 20% of the U.S.'s energy source until this day.
Though not created with destructive intent, nuclear energy was quickly weaponized. Its mass destructive abilities were first brought to the U.S. government's attention in October 1939 when Einstein sent a letter to FDR warning him that the Germans may already be developing an atomic bomb. This warning gave birth to the Manhattan Project, which employed over 20,000 workers and thousands of scientists and engineers. Though Germany had surrendered by the time the first atomic bomb was tested in July 1945, President Truman decided to use the technology against the Japanese and dropped 2 bombs on them in August. After the war ended, despite international discussion of banning nuclear weapons, the nuclear arms race had begun. Today, 9 countries possess nuclear weapons, 5 host nuclear weapons, and 23 are in nuclear alliances.
When evaluated in light of impact on climate, land use, waste disposal, fuel availability, safety, internalized environmental costs, and technology transfer, nuclear power is an energy option that is itself sustainable and has helped America achieve widely held goals of sustainable development as of today.
Although nuclear power plants have proven to be a valuable asset to the socioeconomic wealth of the nation, there are concerns about adverse effects posed to the environmental and physical health of the community. Nuclear power plants often require large amounts of space, which upsets the ecological balance of nature, exposes humans to unsafe levels of radiation, and impairs the recreational and aesthetic value of the community.
The U.S. government is the most influential in making decisions about nuclear energy. The government controls the nuclear industry's security program, reactor construction, and research. Politicians during this time competing with other nations also impacted power distribution. Engineers have shaped resource legislation by conducting research, which is then used as a basis for government decisions about the storage and distribution of the energy. Industry executives and the public also pressure the government for more safety considerations. Important nuclear energy legislation include the Atomic Energy Acts of 1946 and 1954, which outlined the distribution and use of nuclear energy and founded the Atomic Energy Commission. The Energy Reorganization Act of 1974 founded the NRC and closed the AEC.
Uranium, the primary element used in nuclear production, was mined heavily during the Cold War era. The EPA is currently assessing 520 abandoned mines in the Navajo Nation. Residents were exposed to radioactivity via dust and contaminated drinking water, and it will take decades to assess and begin cleanups of these mines.
Nuclear energy is a sustainable energy source that has reservoirs of uranium to fuel reactors 24 hours a day for the next 100 years. It is a clean energy source that strengthens the nation's socioeconomic wealth by creating jobs and stimulating growth. Nuclear energy can efficiently meet the projected 28% increase in demand for energy by 2040.
Nuclear power has evolved greatly from resource extraction to the storage of spent energy from when it originated during the 1930s to 1960s time period. The resource's storage, distribution, and value have been influenced by several groups throughout the decades, including the government and engineers. As a whole, nuclear power has had a prominent role in America's history of resource use and continues to be a big player in today's energy market.